Mr. Darryl Thrower. You know he's an admin in the XL Giant Bully Group. We got a lot of questions for him, good, bad, the ugly, and something about a particular post that just came up this past week. Stay tuned. We're going to make it happen in 3, 2, 1. Let's go. What is your pet peeve about breeding American Bullies? What is the one thing that you definitely want to concentrate on, whether it's, east, west, high rear, over under bite, kink tail, stiff stifles, rear quarters? What's the one thing that is your number one pet peeve?
I would have to say my pet peeve in breeding bullies is structure, overall structure. We've never had to deal with something like that before. And other dogs that we've bred, other breeds that we bred, like I was explaining to you, when it came to the bull lurchers, we had a difference of opinions when it came to the structure. Me living in California and the dogs being as fast as they were caused a lot of injuries with all the rocks and hard surfaces and debris that's out in the land. Whereas you go to another state and it's not necessarily, the dogs can fly in there for the 3 days with no injuries. When it comes to bullies, it's kind of the same principle, which I wasn't used to with that, but it was an easy adaptation to make. When it comes to bullies, there's just been so much bad structure bred into them. Weak pasterns, bow legs, easty westy, high rears, stiff stifles, underbites, the way that, not even just the kink tail, but the way the tail hangs, whether it's a gay tail, does it have the pump handle type tail? It's just the dog wasn't cemented before we got into it. You know what I mean? So here we are, and we're seeing the best of pictures and getting into it, watching a little bit of the movement, but still not really cognizant of the things that we may notice with this dog or something we need to be worried about with the whole breed. You know what I mean? So that I would say is a pet peeve of mine. I think we did pretty good with the dogs we chose, especially since we were more focused on the temperaments of the dogs. So I think we did pretty good. But in our yard, angulation is something that we definitely have to focus on. And when you've got this dog that's got a great temperament but can use better angulation, but this dog's got great angulation but can have a better temperament, it's like, do we balance it out? Do we throw them both away? That's kind of my pet.
So what do you do? So what do you do in that circumstance? Now, we got people watching us, and that's a perfect question. I'm sure somebody out there has a dog with great temperament, not necessarily the best angulation. Now, I could tell you, because I've spoken on record, angulation and stiff stifles is one of the hardest things to be able to breed into, at least for me and in my opinion. So say you have a dog that has great temperament and not necessarily the best angulation. Do you go ahead and breed it? And in your experience, does it normally take 1, 2, or 3 generations to go ahead and fix something like that?
In my opinion, temperament is the hardest thing to get perfect.
Okay.
I think a lot of people have a broad idea of what good temperament is. To me, temperament is something that has to be really dialed in and fine-tuned. It has to be a major part of every breeding. I look at temperament and performance as two of the have to be treated the same. With this being more of a companion type breed, then performance isn't necessarily there other than through functionality, but temperament is still a major issue because it's a dog. So I think, a bad temperament is one of the hardest things to breed out. And especially if you're looking at, when I look at a breeding, I don't look at it as I want to get at least 2 or 1 perfect dog out of this breeding. I'm looking at the whole litter. What 2 dogs that we can create, and we put those together, what do you think we'll get out of the whole litter? Like, what should the whole litter have? Whether it's color, structure, temperament, based off the 2. That's kind of my focus. What can we do with the whole litter?
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you just brought something up that I've brought up in past videos, and that's where we brought up something where I don't know if we made it up ourselves or if it's something that's been around. To be honest with you, but I've been told by a lot of people I've been the only person or the first person to speak on it, and that is that we actually categorize our dogs in three different categories. And
Okay.
I want to know if you do the same. We, in a breeding, you got to realize everything is based on probabilities because this is genetics. So on a 10 dog litter, you're going to get one or two that are going to be perfect.
Yep.
If you're really lucky, if you're a good breeder and you're lucky, you're going to get three. That's about as far as it's going to get. Then you're going to middle of the pack somewhere around 5 to 6 pups, and then you're going to have that one or two pups that we consider to be pet quality. So in essence, you have 1 to 2 show quality pups. Then you have the middle of the pack, which we consider to be breed quality. We identify breed quality by having one major flaw or less. You can have one major and one minor, but no more than that. If you have two major flaws or more, we consider that to be pet quality. How do you guys break it down in your yard?
For us, like I said, because it was just getting started, our focus was 100% temperament. So when there were several, we didn't let the dogs go until they were 10 weeks old because we constantly wanted to be looking at that. So what I looked for as markers of temperament were the major one was and I don't hear a lot of it spoken on, but the inquisitive drive in the pups. Um, Basically meaning if I make a sound, I want to know that whole litter is curious as to where that sound came from. Now, I know there's going to be some pups that will get up and head over there. I know there's some pups that will turn their head and then go back to what they were doing. And there's some pups that aren't even going to acknowledge that there was a sound. So our major thing in that inquisitive drive in pups, from my experience, it fades as about right around 6 months old and starts to become intelligence or a level of intelligence within that dog. And that's just something I've noticed from working dogs a lot, that those dogs that were the most inquisitive, that were the most curious. And then I'll go to, by the time they hit about 6 weeks old, now I'm going to give them a little more room to where if I make a sound in one room, are they willing to who's willing to head to the door and see where that came from? Because like I said, inquisitive drive fades in, I'd say 6 months to a year, but begins to turn into the intelligence of the dog. Another thing that we looked at was when it came to these dogs, when it came to structure, temperament, we had a various little things: inquisitive drive, prey drive. We knew we wanted that low. We knew we wanted not too low, but around medium phase. We knew we didn't want to see a lot of dominance or rank drive in the pups. That was another thing we watched out for. We don't really have it in the sire and the dams that we're using. But we also wanted to make sure it didn't show up in the pups because it can come from a grandparent, great grandparent. So we wanted to make sure that the dominance and rank drive, as we saw the pups getting along, wasn't what we would normally see with necessarily our Jack Russells or our Pitbulls, that we were breeding. So that was something we kept an eye on. As far as structure, our first main focus was not having high rears. That was our if a high rear shows up, that's a problem,
So that's your pet peeve in structure. I'm just talking about structure.
Yeah.
So high rear.
The high rear is the pet peeve. That is my pet peeve because it can come from shoulders being spread far apart in the front. It can come from back end. You know what I mean? It's not always that the back legs were longer than the front legs. You know what I mean?
So tell me, what are the reasons? What would you tell somebody that's going to go buy a pup out there when you're looking at rear angulation and you're looking at a high rear? Okay, what are several things that are the cause to the high rear? Because a high rear could be stiff stifles. It could be what? Break it down for me.
It can be your high rear can start off in the front. If you have weak pasterns in the front, you're going to have a high rear. You can also have dogs when you see they're bow-legged. You have the bows in the legs. Well, that means those legs don't have the front as tall as it should be. So therefore, create a high rear. Again, in the front, you can have shoulders that are set where the feet are sitting apart wider than the shoulders. So if those shoulders aren't set right, again, you're
losing length because the dog has to open the paws out more. Whereas if he had it straight where the shoulders were at, he would be raised correct.
Then when you get to the back, because I've always learned to study dogs from toes up, tail forward. And that's how I look at every dog. And, you know, when you do get to the back of the dog, you know, the angulation of those rear legs is a major thing. You know what I mean? And again, in high rears, if those stifles are stiff, that rear is going to be up. So there's just you see a lot of high rears in the breed. But what sucks is you're seeing a lot of high rears for a lot of different reasons. And then you also can get high rears and stiff stifles from pups that aren't kept up well, not getting enough exercise, not fed correctly, being overfed. These are all things that play a part in it also.
And I'm glad you touch up on that. A lot of times I've spoken on this on the past. You know, I've dealt with you know, old school breeders and whatnot, and their way of seeing things sometimes is just based on, I guess, just hearing it or seeing it done, and this is just the way it's done. And one of the things that they love to do is to pound the dog up with protein. The more protein you give them, the better. And that's the worst thing you could do to a pup, particularly for the tendons, ligaments, and soft tissue.
Yes.
Darryl was just talking about, you know, weak pasterns. I could tell you right now, I could go to somebody's yard, and if I see a high rear, the very first thing I'm going to go look at is, what are you feeding that pup? And if you happen to be feeding high protein, I already know what the problem is. If I'm seeing low set patterns,
are so marketed to the community. You know, you got on one hand, everybody says, okay, it's just a companion breed. But then you're feeding it all these high performance foods, and that's what you're for, and it's too much protein. You know, with us, I will switch the female to puppy food before she has the litter. But once the pups get off of her, I throw them on adult food right off the bat, because the puppy food it's great for your small and medium-sized dogs. But when you start to get medium to large, it's too much protein.
People don't realize also the bone density in a large breed dog is going to be less than a small breed dog for simple reasons. On a small breed, you have smaller space to where which the bone is. So everything's going to be more compact and more concentrated. So the feed that you're giving this dog is that much compact and concentrated. When you give it to a large breed who actually needs it to slow down a little bit as far as the density is concerned, you're going to start causing all sorts of issues. Keep this in mind. When you feed a dog, I don't care what breed, when you feed a dog red meat, immediately, when it's a puppy, you're immediately activating its growth factor. You're telling it to grow faster. Okay. Now, in our breed, I've said it from day one. One of the biggest things that afflicts our breed is the tendons, it's the ligaments, and the soft tissue. They do not grow as fast as the bone. Therefore, if you're feeding your dog, you know, and your pup is 6 months old and he's 80 pounds, and you're sitting here just stuffing him with ground beef, you're causing everything that dog's going to have wrong with his soft tissue, with his pasterns, and possibly a high rear. And it will also the soft tissue. They do not grow as fast as the bone. I've seen many a times. I've gone back. I've seen a dog that looks like a total train wreck, and I've gone back to see the parents. I've sat down and seen the pedigree, and I'm like, no, this has to be the feeding. And I get down to it, you know, talk with the customer that's calling me for a consultation or whatnot. Like, what are you feeding him? Oh, I'm feeding him dine, and I'm feeding him ground beef. And, you know, we mix, you know, we mix it all together. You know, we feed them a 5-gallon bucket at a time. And so that's essentially your number one issue. So, you know, I'm glad you touched up on it. Nutrition plays a vital role.
It's a huge
Yeah, elaborate on that.
You know, I think the bullies get hit hard. I do see it affecting other breeds, but I think the bullies get hit hard due to the fact the internet and the pictures and the cute little chubby puppy pictures, and people don't realize you have to, when you're dealing with it's anything, you know. Well, actually, you know what, we dealt with when the few greyhound breedings that I did, it was the same thing. You these long-legged dogs, and if they're not fed correctly, you
Right.
know, there's an imbalance in their structure. And it's the same thing with bullies. You know, it's no different. I think anytime you go somewhat extreme, which these are extreme dogs. You know, there's a wow factor when you see these dogs and the bone and the size and the girth and their power. So you think, if you're an inexperienced breeder, you think bone, size, power, calcium, protein, meat,
Right.
you know, and that's not it. You want to rely on the genetics of the dogs to handle that first year. You know, you, not that you want to be feeding as little as possible, but you really want to be watching the weight of that dog. You know, if you get a dog, a large dog has the ability to carry a large stomach. A large stomach has the ability to make a back and a spine sink down. And you
Right.
have to be aware of those things as a breeder. So it's a puppy right now. All I needed to do is be a Labrador. I don't need it to be a bully yet. You know what I mean? Just let it
Yes.
a dog at this point. You know, and
You
same
know,
thing. Go ahead.
let me in on that just real quick. And I've told people this, and so I'm gonna drop a little secret that I've kind of figured out. And Darryl, if I'm saying anything wrong, just go ahead and interject and correct me if I'm saying something wrong. But what I tell people, because a lot of times I'll get a consultation and they're like, "Hey, I want you to see my puppy," and I see the pup one night. I give them the evaluation. Then they want to get to the dietary side. When we give you a consultation, I don't know if you're aware, Darryl, but I'll say this for the people that haven't done it or don't know about it. We do consultations for $50. Pretty much, you send me video and pictures and the picture pet of your dog. I pretty much give you the best shot, whether you're going to be buying an expensive dog or whether you simply want me to go ahead and give you a recommendation as to where you're at. I've had a lot of people with their pup at 3 or 4 months, and I see the pup, I see low set pasterns, I see a slight high rear, low set pasterns, and I see the paws coming out outside of the shoulders. So immediately what I tell them is what you need to do is, what are you feeding your pup? Well, I'm feeding them, for example, Victor Puppy. Okay, so you need to get them off of Victor Puppy. Let's go to raw. And if you are hell bent on feeding exclusively kibble, then we need to put the puppy on adult kibble and give them a multivitamin. And then they look at me cross-eyed. They're like, "Why are we putting them on adult kibble?" Well, the reason we're going to adult kibble, and I just spoke on this, is because the density of large adult breed is a lot less than what you're going to get on puppy kibble. And if your puppy has low set pasterns and he's wide, what he's telling you is he's having to do all this to redistribute the weight because his soft tissue and ligament and tendons are not ready to carry the weight that they currently have. So here's a secret I'm going to drop on you. A lot of you talk to me about Bully Max, and I have nothing against Bully Max. But I will tell you, I do not give anything, any type of supplement except for our gorilla milk. I don't give any type of supplement to our dogs until they're at least a year and a half.
There you
Why
go.
is that? This is when their bone plates actually seal, fam. Listen to me. This is when their bone plates seal. It is at that time that you could put a weighted vest. It is at that time that you could do all sorts of things with your dog. When you start doing this sooner, you start causing all of these micro injuries on a daily basis to their pastern. And by the time your pup is 6 months old, 6 to 8 months old, then at that point you've caused enough damage that you can only correct it by maybe 20 to 30%. So if you could just let your puppy be a puppy, like Darryl was saying, if you could just feed it and keep it at a proper weight all the way to it's a year and a half, trust me, by that time, that's when the adult body is starting to kick in. That's essentially when your dog is somewhere around 23 human years old, for instance. And when you start giving them the Bully Max at that point, and you start putting a weighted vest if you wanted to, or have them pull, that's when your dog is truly going to pop. But to do that earlier, you're doing yourself and your dog a disservice. I hope I didn't take the winds out your sail, but I kind of had to bring that in because lately I've been getting a lot of people writing to me and asking me this over and over again. And I keep telling them, if your puppy is getting more than 16% protein and it's less than 4 months old, you need to do something with that diet. You can start giving them a large breed adult, reduce the amount a little bit, add some rice or spaghettis, and add a multivitamin, and you're set. You just reduced the protein percentage. Protein is a two-edged sword. Your dog needs it for growth, but if you give too much of it, you're going to run into trouble.
Yes.
So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump to our next question, man. I got on my little soapbox there for a minute. So let's jump to our next question here real quick.